And now, please allow me to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Yao Zhihua, who is a professor in the Department of Philosophy at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Professor Yao specializes in Buddhist philosophy, Indian philosophy, and philosophy of religion. His major publications in English include books such as Non-Existent Objects in Buddhist Philosophy, published by Bloomsbury Academic, and The Buddhist Theory of Self-Cognition, published by Routledge. In addition, Professor Yao co-edited a groundbreaking collection of scholarly essays comparing Indian and Chinese philosophical traditions entitled Brahman and Tao, Comparative Studies of Indian and Chinese Philosophy. Finally, he's also the author of various journal articles in Journal of Indian Philosophy, Philosophy East and West, Journal of Chinese Philosophy, and in other prestigious journals. Therefore, it is my great pleasure to invite Professor Yao to share his presentation with us. So, Professor Yao, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you for your kind introduction and invitation to this very interesting event. Let me share my screen. Yeah, this topic of translation and interpretation is the kind of everyday struggle, for us, for many of scholars like us. So today I'm going to show you one of the examples I'm struggling right now, actually, even. So the title now is revised as Emptiness as Dependent Designation, Chinese translations of Madhyamaka Buddhism. So I don't need to talk too much about the importance and the richness of Chinese translations of Buddhist texts. Actually, not only Buddhist, but also Sankhya and Vishishka texts, right? Today, I'm going to only use the example of Chinese translations of Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamaka Karika and its various commentaries. And due to the limit of time, I'm only going to discuss one concept, which is dependent designation. This concept is found in this verse, verse 18 of chapter 24, which is usually regarded as the most important verse in emptiness for the whole Madhyamaka tradition, even for the whole Buddhist tradition. So luckily, we have Sanskrit, Tibetan translations, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4 classical Chinese translations. And here's my English translation. So we declare that dependent arising is emptiness. This emptiness is dependent designation. This emptiness itself is the middle way. In this verse, Nagarjuna reveals the close relationship among 4 key concepts: dependent arising, patitya samutpada, emptiness, sunyata, dependent designation, prajnaptya, upadaya, and the middle way, patipat madhyama. Right? Among these concepts, the Madhyamaka seems to favor the first 2, hence they are known as Sunyavada or Madhyamaka. Dependent arising is the doctrine, the third one, the dependent arising is the doctrine accepted by all the Buddhist schools. By contrast, dependent designation is not treated as an important concept, but as Nagarjuna himself holds, dependent designation is as essential as other 3 concepts. So according to Chandrakarti's commentary, prajnaptya upadaya is equivalent to the compound upadaya personality. So we have the Tibetan translation quite stable actually, than the double. And for the Chinese translation, we see two major ones, Jiaming and Jiamingzi. They're roughly the same. Now, the first issue in terms of translation is this Ming or Mingzi, the translation of, if Ming and Mingzi is translation of personality or destination, which is very common in later practice. Then it's Jia, the first character, the translation of Upadaya, which means dependent. In the pre-Buddhist classical Chinese, Jia, in most cases, does mean depending. But if we look into the text itself, for instance, in Kumarajiva's translation, we do see Upadaya appears quite sometimes in different forms, in active forms or in verbal forms, etc. But here I list all the classical translations by Kumarajiva, but in none of these cases, Kumarajiva has translated Upadaya, all related words into Jia. Hence, in this verse 18, should also be counted as the case where he omits Upadaya in Chinese translation. So all these Chinese translators, including Kumarajiva, Prabhakara Matra, Weijing, and Dhamaraksha, omit Upadaya in their translations of these words, which implies that they were not familiar with the concept of dependent designation. As a matter of fact, this verse is the only occasion where dependent designation occurs in this main work of Nagarjuna. In his other works, Nagarjuna never mentions this concept. For instance, in the end of his Vigraha Vyavatani, Nagarjuna praises the Buddha's teachings of emptiness, dependent arising, and middle way as of the same meaning, but omits dependent designation. In his Katita Stava and Achintya Stava, two very short works, Nagarjuna praises teachings of emptiness and dependent arising, but omits the other two. Besides this verse 18, Kumarajiva translate personality into Jiaming in chapter 22, verse 11. And in another verse, chapter 18, verse 6, he translates the related word Prajnapta into Sur. Here I also list some of his translations of some verbal forms of this Prajnapti into various different translations. Here I have I just summarize what I find. So among these various translations of Prajnapti and related words, Kumarajiva emphasized their literal meaning of destination and translate them into verbal forms such as sur, to speak, 可知, knowable, 可得, attainable. The nominal form of Jiaming, which literally means dependent or fake names. This is actually what we're going to discuss later. And Ming, name, can be understood as a result of destination. The Buddhists in general take names or words as impositions upon reality, and hence they have no ontological status. In many cases, however, Kumarajiva translated them into you. This is big word in Chinese, meaning to have, being, or existence, which implies that he admits the weaker ontological status of names and words. Hence, the concept of jiayu. Maybe we can translate as nominal existence. Now I move on to this nominal existence. So we are commenting on this verse 18, in particular part C, Bhavika says the so-called dependent arising is emptiness. It is dependent designation for purpose of communicating about things in the world and beyond the world. It is not designation depending upon what are dependent upon, that is the aggregates. So we have Tibetan phrase. Actually, we also have the Chinese translation phrase. There's some minor difference. But this commentary doesn't really provide too much information on our concept of dependent designation. In his artworks, Bhavika explicitly responds to the Yogacara criticism of Madhyamaka as nihilists by adopting the theory of two truths. He admits that emptiness means nothing exists on the ultimate level. On the conventional level, he insists that the dependently arising things are not merely concepts or destinations, but rather they exist as destinations or like illusions. In other words, if things are merely destinations, then they won't have any ontological status. If, on the other hand, they exist as destinations, then they would have a weaker ontological status, the so-called nominal existence, Prajnapti Sat. Nominal existence is commonly accepted as the type of existence or being in the ontological pluralism of Sarvasvata, Sutrantika, and Yogacara. According to them, nominal existence is possible if it is dependent upon real existence, Vastu. Without real existence, nominal existence is impossible. Among all the Indic commentaries of MMK, only Stirmati's commentary mentions nominal existence. So here I have the quotation, but I'll skip this. If we adapt the ontological pluralism of Bhavika and Stirmati and interpret dependent designation as nominal existence, then how do we understand this part of verse, which sa Prajnapti Padaya? What does the pronoun sa refer to? According to the mainstream understanding of the Chedukirti, the feminine pronoun sa refers to the feminine noun sunyata in the previous part of the verse, 18b. So this sentence would mean this emptiness is nominal existence. But how can emptiness be an existence? Even if it were an existence, it should be an ultimate existence, but not nominal existence. The alternate reading is that the pronoun sa refers to the masculine noun patitya samudpataha in the beginning of the verse 18. Its feminine is because of the influence by the feminine predicative Prajnaptiya designation. This reading is found in Srimati's commentary translated by Wei Jing and Dhamaraksha, which render this part of verse as dependent arising is also nominal existence. Yue Yi Shi Jia Ming. This reading also became dominant among the Chinese Tetai Buddhists who developed their doctrine of the three truths based on their interpretation of this verse 18. More importantly, the theory of the two truths in the Nagarjuna is only a pedagogical principle with the purpose of distinguishing between definitive and provisional meaning, Nyata and Nyata. The Sarvasvadins transformed the theory of the two truths into their ontological pluralism. On their influence, But we can also interpret Nagarjuna's to choose into the theory with ontological implications. However, when reading Nagarjuna's works, if we do not commit to ontological pluralism, the so-called nominal existence is self-contradictory. This is because names or destination are words and concepts without any ontological status, and hence they cannot be the existence. Another way of understanding dependent designation is to interpret as designate names, 假名, which is evident in all Chinese translations by Kumarjiva, Parakarmatra, and Vijing and Dhamaraksha. In particular, the brief commentary on the subject and discussion is found in Kumarjiva's translation of Pingala's Zhonglong. His commentary says, emptiness is also empty. Only for the purpose of guiding the sentient beings, one speaks by using designated names. It seems to comment on designation without mentioning dependent. It also indicates that pronoun sa refers to sunyata, which is also the mainstream view after Chandrakirti. To say emptiness is empty means that emptiness does not exist. Meanwhile, Nagarjuna prices emptiness together with the dependent arising and middle way as the Buddha's highest teachings. To ease this tension, we usually interpret this thing as the name of emptiness is empty. But elsewhere in Pingala's commentary, which is in chapter 13, he mentions the existence of worldly things. This idea of nominal existence could be contributed to its translator Kumarjiva, who has a strong Sarvasvata background. Now, dependent destination is an important concept in another commentator, Palita's commentary, where he elaborated it in more details than any other commentators. But unfortunately, in his Tibetan version of the commentary, chapter 24 is adapted from the older commentary, Akudabaya, which is also only extant in Tibetan. Commenting on this verse 18, this commentary only rephrases Nagarjuna's verse in prose without much elaboration. It says here, if anything is existent, it is dependently arising, and dependent designation. Elsewhere in his commentary, but the Palita explicitly explains non-existence in terms of dependent designation. For example, he says, therefore, it should be known that things called time does not exist at all. It is established by means of dependent designation. There's some other quotations I'll just skip. So obviously, such an operation of denying all existence will lead to the worry of nihilism. But the Palita explains that time, etc., which he denies, are things that the opponent conceives of as existing in intrinsic nature, but they can be established by dependent designation. Elsewhere, he also admits that many others, such as agent, karma, deformant body, and more importantly, rebirth, can be established in the same way by dependent destination. I'll skip this part, and that is to say, the rebirth, etc., can be designated and established at the level of words and concepts, but they have no ontological status. I'll skip to the next one. Sorry. However, but Palitha's interpretation also faced difficulties. First of all, Nagarjuna is talking about dependent designation rather than mutual designation. Secondly, Nagarjuna himself explicitly denounced the mutual dependence of things in the context of discussing the relationship between fire and fuse in chapter 10. Suppose that we follow the Palitha and limit ourselves within the scope of concepts. Even if concept A depends on concept B, it does not mean that concept B must depend on concept A, as it may depend on concept C or others. So strictly speaking, mutual designation only applies to relative concepts such as big and small, long, short, high and low, etc. There are special cases of broader dependent designation. Therefore, we should not equate the broader dependent designation with the narrow mutual designation. Now, we'll trace the concept of dependent designation to Vachiputrias, another major Buddhist sect besides Sarvasvatians and Mahasangikas. Among their few extant texts, we find that dependent destination is an important concept, which is usually translated as 一说, 受教授, 受使者 in classical Chinese. According to the Vachiputrias, the person or Pudgala is designated in three ways. The first is the dependent destination. The second is destination of the past. The third is destination of cessation. They often use the metaphor of fire and fuse to explain the non-identity and non-difference between the person and aggregates. The person is the concept or destination, but it is not merely the concept or destination, rather it is dependent upon existing aggregates. Since the person is neither identical nor different from the aggregates, it is further described as the ineffable. The Vachiputrias classified all the dhammas into 5 storages: the past, the present, the future, the unconditioned, and the ineffable. The ineffable is not describing the ordinary pre-linguistic experience, but rather it refers to the highest ultimate reality. By tracing the close relationship between dependent destination, the person, the ineffable in Vachiputria, we propose to interpret the concept of dependent destination in Nagarjuna in terms of ineffability. For the Vachiputrias, the person is ineffable, but for Nagarjuna, emptiness is ineffable. Hence, he says this emptiness is dependent destination, which equals ineffable. The expression emptiness is ineffable is often seen in the large body of perfection wisdom literature, which is the source of inspiration for Nagarjuna. For the Vachiputrias, the person is dependent destination, but it is not merely a concept or destination, nor is it nominal existence. Instead, it is the highest reality, the ineffable beyond all the conditioned and unconditioned dhammas. Being non-identical with the existent aggregates, the person is not existent. Being non-different from aggregates, the person is not non-existent. Being the agent of rebirth, it is not committed to the view of annihilation. Being different from the internal Atma, it is not committed to the view of eternity. This reminds us of Nagarjuna's middle way of neither annihilation nor the internal, neither identity, no difference, as elaborated in the beginning of MMK. Being the ineffable ultimate reality, emptiness can also be described as the middle way. So Nagarjuna says this emptiness itself is the middle way. Sorry. As for another key concept, dependent arising, we should distinguish between dependent arising, pratitya samutpada, and dependent arising, pratitya samutpanna. Although Tibetan translators use seldom distinguish the two and translate both into Tenzin Jianjun, the Chinese translators often emphasize their distinction. Nagarjuna characterized dependent arising in terms of non-arising and emptiness, but dependent arising in terms of arising and empty. He prizes dependent arising as the Buddha's teaching, whereas reject dependent arising phenomena throughout his writings. At this point, Nagarjuna could be influenced by the Mahasangikas, who treat the principle of dependent arising as one of the 9 unconditioned dhammas and distinguish it from the dependent arising conditioned phenomena. We have explained that dependent designation, emptiness, and middle way are closely related to ineffability. Since Nagarjuna treats dependent arising as equivalent to those 3 key concepts in verse 18, we can infer that dependent arising should also be closely related to ineffability. Nagarjuna might follow the Vajrapurushas in his classification of all dhammas by positing the ineffable over and above the conditioned and unconditioned dhammas. His effort of rejecting all the conditioned and unconditioned dhammas is to reveal this storage of ineffability in which lies the foundational Buddhist teaching of dependent arising. So finally, I have the conclusion. Basically, when we try to interpret this concept of dependent destination, we have 3 options. So I reject the first nominal existence and second designated names and propose to interpret it in terms of ineffability. So that could be what Nagarjuna means in that verse. Thank you. Oh, I took too much time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Yao, for your brilliant presentation.